or corporation or association holding assets for another party, often with legal authority and a duty to make decisions on their behalf. These responsibilities require making decisions based on a standard of trust, good faith, honesty, and a thoughtful and thorough assessment of the facts. The Vermont Pension Investment Committee members act in a fiduciary role and owe a duty to the 50,000 members and beneficiaries of the participating retirement plans, as well as to the taxpayers who help fund the plan. Both IRS rules governing government pension funds, and there is a difference, sir, and state statutes make it clear that my job as a fiduciary is to manage the pension plan fund for the exclusive benefit of the beneficiaries of that trust and with the duty of loyalty. I take that responsibility seriously. It's about keeping a promise. We make a commitment to Vermont's law enforcement officers, firefighters, teachers, social workers, and all public employees when they sign up to protect our streets, race to put out a fire, teach our kids, protect the welfare of our children, plow our roads, and fix our bridges. Frankly, I would hope that every elected official in this room would share in that promise to make sure that we work hard for Vermont and that all folks are made whole and that the promise of retirement security is delivered for every single Vermonter. Vermont Pension Investment Committee members, elected officials, and other parties have a duty to the taxpayers and to the members of the system to conduct our analyses, present our positions in a thoughtful, factual manner. Frankly, I'm concerned that the recent debates on these issues, as they relate to fossil fuels as a whole, and specifically to coal, which we are discussing today, have taken on a different tone. It's about sound bites. It's about persuasion rather than assessment of the facts. We've seen inaccurate numbers on coal losses and that have been subsequently proven wrong. These inaccurate numbers, in turn, were repeated in public opinion pieces and news articles to support positions to rid the portfolio of coal. We've seen similar numbers. A number that was sent out a few months back was 77 million from losses of a group called the Decarbonizer. That's been bandied about as fact. We've proven that number to be wrong. The data is incomplete and it's based on erroneous assumptions. Employers and taxpayers demand better and should expect better. Decisions about investments should be made in a thoughtful manner. Moreover, they should not be legislated, but should be done through the vehicle the legislature created and charged with the fiduciary responsibility to make these decisions, the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. And we talked a little today, and I'm going to pull out a sheet if I can find it. Yes, what you did create. And so this is what the legislature created. The Vermont Pension Investment Committee shall be responsible for the investment of the assets of the state teacher retirement system of Vermont, the state employees retirement system, and the Vermont municipal employees system pursuant to section 472 of this title. I'm going to skip through some of the rest of those. The next section. The committee shall strive to maximize total return on investment within acceptable levels of risk for public retirement systems in accordance with the standard of care provided by the Prudent Investor Act. We have resolutions from employee groups and retirement groups in the Vermont League of Cities and Towns who are the primary stakeholders, urging you not to legislate investment decisions. Other stakeholders are currently contemplating similar resolutions. These represent taxpayers and employee groups that have skin in the game. I submit the following resolutions to you, all of which clearly indicate the investment decisions should reside with the VPIC. And you've received these before. I have them set here, but those are from the VSEA Retired Chapters Board of Trustees, the VSEA Board of Trustees, the VSEA Council, the Vermont Retired State Employees Association, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, the Vermont Troopers Association, the Vermont Retired Teachers Association, the NEA, the Professional Firefighters of Vermont, and the AFL-CIO. It has been argued that the legislature set a precedent for legislating investments. I would agree that 30 years ago, the legislature did in fact legislate divestment from South Africa. But since that time, we have created new statutory frameworks for managing our trustee and fiduciary relationships around pensions. The pension trustee boards and the VPIC have subsequently developed well-articulated policies on voting on proxies, engaging with companies, and have developed an environmental, social, and governance or ESG policy. The 1997 decision to divest from tobacco was done by the trustee boards, not the legislature, after careful consideration and dialogue. The process involved a two-stage process that is part of our prudence requirements in doing investments. As fiduciaries, they made an investigation into the risk and return characteristics in a thoughtful study. This is called procedural prudence. Having made that investigation, they took the step to make a decision. This is called substantive prudence. And I'm sure if you contacted Governor Douglas, who was treasurer at the time, he would confirm that. In 2007, with the formation of VPIC having already taken place, a similar process and discussion took place to make the decision on the Sudan divestment. Investment decisions, including the one to divest, should be made by fiduciaries charged by state statute with that responsibility, and only after prudence has been exercised. The current dialogue around coal divestment through the legislature lacks all of these critical elements. I am committed to a full vetting and transparent process on these issues. I have previously provided you a copy of a letter from Tom Galanka. I think he's back there someplace. Tom, you still there? Okay. Chair of the Vermont Pension Investment Committee, and myself to Governor Shumlin, inviting the governor to the Vermont Pension Investment Committee to present on these issues. While I am a member of that committee, one member of that committee, and cannot speak for the whole, I am committed to engaging in a collaborative and positive effort to review all of the various information provided by advocates of divestment, independent investment advisors and professionals, nonprofits, and others in a full vetting of the coal investments and the issues of climate change. As your treasurer, I will commit to moving forward to take on such a task in a collaborative manner. I will continue to be guided by the facts rather than by politics, my statutory requirements as a fiduciary, and my responsibilities to the hardworking state teacher and municipal employees and other taxpayers. And that's a very good point. When I say state teacher and municipal employees, they are also taxpayers. One of the sad outcomes from the divestment debate is that multiple constituencies, all of whom care deeply about the environment, have become polarized. It very much reminds me of what happens in D.C., not something I want to replicate in Vermont. While this is happening, we miss the opportunities to take these issues of climate change and the issues to the carbon deniers, to the climate change deniers, and to those companies that are doing real harm to the environment. This is not the way Vermonters get things done. We work together. As treasurer, I am committed to addressing the issues of climate change. I've made this a clear priority since I took the oath of office as treasurer, and invite you to take a look at our Treasurer's Office Sustainability Report, which is on our website. My experience has been one of collaborative effort to reach mutual goals. I very much hope there are areas of mutual interest where we can effectively work together with various partners to address and mitigate the risks of climate change, but not in a manner that undermines my fiduciary responsibilities or predetermines the results or puts the future of retirees at risk. I think we can manage to be good stewards of our environment, the taxpayer, and all of our public employees if we work together to find meaningful solutions. To accomplish this, investment decisions should stay with the VPIC committee. We look forward to working with the various groups to address these issues and urge the legislature from refraining from undermining the fiduciary framework it has been part of creating in the first place. Thank you for your consideration on these issues. Let's do the right thing for taxpayers, including employees, and for Vermont's financial future. I look forward to engaging with interested parties through a thoughtful discussion on the issues to come. And if I could, I'd like to address a couple of comments that I heard going forward, and frankly would like to correct the record on a few things. One, when Ed was talking about the SEC and stranded assets, we agree. And frankly, I am a part of an effort to try to push the SEC to do more compliance in the area of environmental disclosure in companies like ExxonMobil. We're working to get a group of treasurers, and we're working with nonprofits in this state and nationally to try to push this effort. And there's also efforts being done in other states. A congressman from Pennsylvania, for instance, Cartwright, is very active in this issue. He mentioned the policies that we have and that they were old, particularly the ESG policy. The ESG policy was developed in 2013, the Environmental, Social, and Governance Policy. In addition to that, we have a proxy voting policy that was started in either 2003 or 2004. I'm doing a little of this from memory since I didn't bring all my materials with me, but it's been updated on a regular basis through 2014, frankly, to make it more green in every one of the updates. We talked about exhausting, Ed said that we need to exhaust all other options. I agree. The option is bringing it back to the board in a thorough, full discussion, transparent discussion at the committee, and I am committed to working with you to get that done. And if you see my record on working through groups and to find collaborative solutions, I think that that's something that when I make that promise, I will deliver on that promise. Now, one of the comments that Bill made, and I appreciated all of his comments on climate change, is that constructive engagement doesn't work, and he mentioned ExxonMobil. What he didn't mention is that I also co-filed a resolution with BP Oil that won 98% of the vote and had management support. Also, we hear that companies can't reinvent themselves. Well, again, I will mention that some of the companies in Europe with a different regulatory environment have been very successful there. Total SA, which is on the dirty carbon list, is a company that now owns 60% of Sun Power, which provides materials to many of the solar companies, including the ones that do business in this state. And in 2011, 2012, when those companies were having difficulties, they did in fact give them very low cost financing to help them through that. I'm old enough, somebody mentioned their age in the 70s earlier, I'm old enough, 62, to remember Ma Bell in the 70s. And anyone who can suggest that the telecommunications industry has not transformed themselves would be in error. Companies can and will do that or not succeed. And that's where our investment managers take a look at the details and make assessments. From my end, I was going to talk about the Bankers Associations. You need to talk about the Prudent Investor Act. I think we've done that. There was a comment made about Norway and Divestment. And Norway remains one of the largest single investors in coal mining. The Guardian just wrote a piece on that. So it's not some of the statements that have been made, I get the issue and I get the persuasion in it, but we have to stick with a realistic look at the facts. One of the comments was made about ExxonMobil earlier, that we could sell that stock easily because someone would buy it up. And that's precisely the point. You would sell that stock, someone else would buy it up, and that someone else would not care about the environment the same way that the Vermonters do, sending us to ExxonMobil to stigmatize the company. Whether or not we received a large percentage of the vote, we stigmatized the company and we were able to get across the point. I said directly to the chair that I thought his approach to renewables was wholly inadequate. From my end, these are important issues to remember. One of the others that was mentioned was that, and I'm frankly appalled, that we look behind, that we're caught in the past, and we don't look forward with our investment managers. I would point out that the individual who made that statement has never come to a BPIP meeting. Okay? And from my perspective, we have 22 managers, 17 of whom, by the way, are signatories on UN principles for responsible investment. And 36 or 35, I don't have the exact number with me, 30-some odd investment buckets. They're not there to lose money. Those folks are there, they get paid on the basis of providing profit to the state, maximizing return. They have economists. They have folks that are associated with that make those investments. They are doing their job to maximize return. We have had a conversation with those managers, and we can provide you with the documentation of that, about the stranded asset base, about climate change. How do you bake it into your investment process? When do you see that happening? And how are you baking that in so that we are protected in terms of our assets and making the right decisions for the future? I think it's ludicrous to take a look at a period of time and make an assumption that we have behaved irresponsibly in not moving those investments. For me, the discussion should be about facts, not sound bites. Let's get together. Let's work together. I'm committed to a transparent process. Whether or not VPIC would do that. Again, I'm one member of VPEC, and I think that they will, and I don't know if the chair wants to respond to that. But for my bottom line as treasurer, I will commit to an open dialogue on these issues. We have not evaluated this bill. We want to evaluate this bill. Let us have that opportunity as fiduciaries to do our jobs correctly and to move forward. Again, I would suggest that the precedent, 30 years ago, we made a decision to legislate divestments. The last two have been done by the board. There was also a comment that there's been no regrets. I would point out that CalPERS, the biggest plan in the country, has issued a report in September through their investment advisor, that's Wilshire Consulting. And they indicated they took a look at the last several divestments. And what they concluded was the overall loss, I'm going to be a little imprecise in my numbers here, someplace between just under $4 billion and someplace around $8 billion of losses, even though they made certain decisions up front. Now, for me, you've got to look at the best information you have at the time. You've got to do your job. But I think that for me, let us do our job appropriately. Let us have that dialogue with folks about this bill. And let us do the right thing for every Vermonter. Have retirement security and a clean environment. Thank you.
So I'm not exactly, I mean, I don't know I'm not exactly sure how to ask this. So one of the things that I hadn't thought about before was when Mr. McKibben was talking, he talked about state expenses, overall state expenses. So we have, whether you agree with climate change or not, I don't know if there are people here who don't, but we've had an increase in kind of weather events. We have a warmer winter. We have no foods and meals taxes coming in. We had to fix all the roads after Irene. So I started thinking about that. So if we're losing money on one hand, skiers and stuff, we're increasing expenses by having to respond to all the weather events. And I guess if we're looking at this, we should be looking at more than, in my mind, just the cost to the retirement system. Because the people who are currently investing in the retirement system are also bearing the expenses of those other either losses or expenses. I'm not exactly sure how to put this, but the Vermont State Employees Association, if we have huge losses of rooms and meals, and so we have less money, do we have to cut positions? So it's kind of, we're going like this. So my question, and we've been talking about this for 2 years. So my question is, has VPIC taken this seriously enough that they have done the procedural prudence evaluation?
Well,
any of it?
They did a procedural prudence evaluation on a larger fossil fuel-free issue and determined that the pension funds would have losses in the area of $9 million annually from doing that. Now, they have not done a procedural prudence in detail. They talked about coal in general, but on the specifics of this bill, and I would want to do that. To your larger question about the issues, that sustainability report, and you know me, I like to write a lot of words, so between pages 18 and 20 are a whole series of next steps that we want to pursue to help us with exactly that point. The SEC project, I talked to several treasurers. I'm trying to get a group a critical mass of treasurers to go with me to meet with the chair of the SEC to see what we can do about compliance. I'm on the carbon asset risk project, so I'm actively engaged with 20 some odd managers about these issues and about how they're managing the stranded asset thesis within their companies. These are meaningful things. Regulatory environment changes at the national level, regulatory changes to these. What the problem with divestment is, in fact, that it is, in fact, a meaningless gesture because just as Jack said, somebody else is going to buy that stock. So what you're doing for a symbolic gesture and causing potential losses to the system. Now, again, I want to look at the rest of the data and all the folks before we finish this conversation. But, and again, with coal, we've got some other discussions that I want to get to. But if the discussion is, I'm going to sell my stock, somebody else is going to buy it that may or may not care as much about the environment, it's not going to address your larger issues around the regulatory issues that permit the type of things that we have in this country, in the abuses of climate change, permit the fact that companies do not make adequate disclosure to the SEC, and change the way that we do business in this country. I want to do both.
I realize that. I guess my question was a little less, and I do realize that somebody else is going to buy it, but
Yes. Now,
we do a lot of things that, we change a lot of things and somebody else is going to pick them up. I mean, so, but my question was, when, I guess, when BTEC looks at whether or not they should invest or not invest, do they take into consideration those things that Mr. McKibben talked about for their future retirees and their grandchildren, or do they only look at the fund as it affects them as retirees? I guess that was my...
Well, the IRS has certain rules around trust funds, and I would point out, someone mentioned earlier the carbon tracker, and the carbon tracker group actually said certain funds, including institutional investment funds, may not be able, because of their fiduciary requirements, do the same things in divestment, and recommended a series of actions that pension funds could take in lieu of that. We're doing all of them. We're doing all of them. And for me, that's the important issue, is to look and say, that's not balance this at the risk to those folks. Again, I want a clean environment, and I want my retirement security, not just, by the way, for every person in this in these plans, but I would like to see retirement security for every single Vermonter. I know that Senator Polina and I agree on that subject, and we've worked and we're striving to take a look at opportunities there, as do many of you. Again, we are regulated as a tax-exempt trust by the Internal Revenue Service. There are certain federal and state statutes that we must comply with, and our first and foremost responsibility is to maximize return for the beneficiaries of those trust funds. That doesn't mean that we can't consider other alternatives, and in fact, our proxy policy and our ESG policy, environmental, social, and governance policy, gives us latitude in ways to make that happen. Yes, sir.
I have a question, but I do want to take issue with one thing that you said, which is that I don't believe that this debate has become particularly politicized. I think we're working through an issue and people have different opinions, and we're doing what happens in the legislature all the time. And I think when it comes to, as I mentioned before, state workers and teachers, the NEA and others, I mean, I've stood with them time and time again. If I thought what we were doing was going to lose money or threaten their retirement in any way, I would not be working on it. I simply would not do it. And I think we could all understand that. I think the right thing to do is to do the right thing, but also get a good return. And what I'm hearing from other witnesses over the last couple of weeks is that we can get a good return by doing what they would call the right thing. But what I want to ask you is, you talked about this, and what would a full vetting of the issue look like? You talked about a collaborative process. And
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what that would look like.
Sure. Before I say that, I would say one more thing to you, Senator, which is stand with them again. They've made their voice clear not to legislate investments. Stand with the employees again, sir.
I think the best way to stand for them is to make sure they don't lose money for their retirement.
And I would agree, and that's why we are doing that. They're standing with us in terms of managing the funds based on the statute. Now, what I would see for a process, VPEC has 12 meetings a year, and they're all day, or most of the day, and we have to deal with a number of different things. Asset allocation, taking a look at what our plans are, hiring managers, hiring best-in-class managers, firing managers, taking a look at, and we manage, by the way, through our managers, those 22 managers, unlike CalSTRS and CalPERS. CalSTRS has 1,200 staff. In CalSTRS, about 150 roughly on the investment side. CalPERS has 2,700 plus staff. I don't know how many are investment. We manage through our managers, so we have to have a dialogue with those folks, and again, that dialogue is including climate change. We need to have time to do those things. So what I would envision and what I would hope, and my ideals, and again, I cannot speak for the committee as a whole, but I will press this issue, is that I would want to do some type of subcommittee that works with us, works with the treasurer, bringing the various advocates, bring in Trillium, bring in the other advocates that have brought this up. I'd like to bring in the Imperial Group because, again, while people have asserted certain things about this, the Imperial Group wrote a very nice piece called Divestment, Spin Doctors Gone Wild, and it takes issue with some of the stuff on both sides of the argument. I would like to bring in our investment advisor to have a dialogue with Clean View, to have a dialogue with Trillium, to work with our staff to look at that. I would like to have some opportunity, and this is going to be tough, but some opportunity. We've already started a dialogue with our investment managers. You know, how do you bake in stranded asset thesis? How do you bake in climate change into your investment process? I'd like to think of a way to expand that dialogue to incorporate other professionals in the process. I'd also like to take a look, and this would be as a treasurer, not necessarily with the VFIC, at some of the other projects that we're working. Take a look at pages 18 through 20, at least I hope it's those pages, 18 through 20, and those next steps. Where can we work with Sierra Club? Where can we work with 350 to improve on the regulatory process? Where can we work to get a campaign going to get more environmental disclosure? Do they want to be involved with our project on the carbon asset risk, where we're interviewing companies and talking to engaging companies about the fact that you've already got got more fossil fuels than we possibly need. Why are you spending our research dollars? So I'd like to have that conversation myself as treasurer. I think that feeds into the other argument, but again, I'd like to see a collaborative process. Senator, you were part of a project that we did a few years back called 10% in Vermont, and actually sponsored a bill here that was fed off of a project that we started 2 years earlier, or a year and a half earlier, called the Local Investment Working Group. That group had a room full of folks with very different views. We had one person who wanted her own currency. We had Chris Delia on the other side of the table. We had the credit unions over there. We had BEIC in there. We had housing groups. We had people with very different beliefs. Some say efficiency, some say renewables. The first year, before 10% of Vermont, we got $16.5 million of housing and energy efficiency projects and a $10 million investment with VITA that allowed us to do, they've actually done about $20 million of energy projects with leveraging some of those dollars. There are ways we can work together. I don't have the whole formula. I'd be happy to sit down with you to engage about who you would want to see as part of that group. But I'm committed to a process to fully vet it. We talked about $615, which is, by the way, the figure of the coal definition that we currently have. And that will vary from day to day. The other day was 608, depending on the market. We want to take a look at what is the cost of a negative screen. Jack is mentioning the cost of that. We have $500 million in equities. What would be the cost of creating a negative screen so that we didn't buy more under that definition? We were able to use some of the research from CalSTRS and not have to use our own research people at a cost to take a look at that definition of coal. But we're going to have to continue to look at how do we, as companies merge and change their definitions, how are we going to manage that? What's the cost of that? I would like to do a full cost-benefit analysis of the merits on the coal side and take a look at it and deal with other issues. For instance, as I mentioned to you in other conversations, other testimony, our largest coal holding is a company that is divesting from coal. It's spinning off its coal. And it's going to turn around and be a company in a different energy sector. Happens to be gas, natural gas. Now, they're spinning that off, and the company, the investment manager, believes it's going to be more profitable. and they got an 8% or 8.2, because that's what our due diligence requires us to do.
The other thing that I would like to see us do is get a good comparison of, or confirm or not, the fact that the fossil fuel-free funds perform as good or better than other funds. I mean, people say they do. People who are investment managers say they do. So either they do or they don't.
Well,
I mean, if they do, that addresses a lot of the risk questions that we're talking about.
it also, a lot of the funds that they talked about today were for high wealth individuals or different types of institutions. We can, I can't comment on what, for instance, Goddard College did. I know that it moved to 2 trillion investments. They have about, I'm guessing, and again, I apologize if someone's here from Goddard College and want to correct me, but I believe their endowment's about $1 million. We have just under $4 billion.
Yeah, but either fossil fuel-free funds perform as good or better than other funds, or they don't, regardless of the stock.
I think you have to.
That's all I'm saying, is I would like us to get to the bottom.
I would like to get to the bottom, comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. And even with apples to apples, you can get grannies and max. We got to take a look and make sure that we get down into the deep dive.
We could redefine coal. And the last thing I would say is I've read the sustainability report 2 or 3 times.
Thank you.
There's a lot of good ideas in there, but there's not a lot of big successes.
Well, I would really disagree with you on that, and frankly, we want to move forward, and I'd be happy for you to come in the office, sit down with us, and find ways that you can help us succeed in those.
Joe, and then Rob.
Madam Treasurer, with me again.
Yes.
Okay.
We are growing short on time, and I'm cognizant of that, so I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions.
And I do have-
Really call for 1 or 2 words.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
First off, we have a bill in front of us that is the focal point of our conversation.
Yes.
A lot of discussion about the broad picture of climate change versus what is being done here. But we really are only talking about 2 entities in this. One is ExxonMobil. Do you know how much our retirement system has invested in ExxonMobil?
Roughly $200,000. I don't have the exact figure, but in that range.
Second one is any publicly traded company that generates 50% or more of its revenue from the mining of thermal coal.
$615. Again, the other day was $608. It will get vary with the market.
Now, you've been here for the testimony of all folks who are assuming, and knowing you're only one person on the board that can speak, but assuming the trends continue, that those kinds of stocks are going down in value. If that trend is continuing, would it be prudent in your eyes to simply divest of those or move on to some other form of stock?
Well, I guess in the case of ExxonMobil, I think we've heard different testimony that again, it would be readily picked up from someone else. I'd like to take a look and have a conversation with our manager. With respect to the $615 position, sure. The question then becomes, the next part of the bill is no more, and do no more investing in that area. That's where the cost is. That's where you have to take a look and say, and I don't have figures on that cost, which is why I want a thoughtful process, but then you need to set up some type of mechanism to prevent you from buying anything else. And if a company changes and now it becomes part of that, I know this is more than 2 words, I'll stop it soon, becomes now part of that definition. How do you know it? How do you find that out? What's the cost of finding out, and what's the cost of the screen that you need to put in so that you don't do any more?
Could that be done through a modification of the ESG?
I think it needs to be done by looking at the cost benefit with an investment advisor and our managers first.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the Senator actually asked a couple questions that they got my questions answered. In particular with the ExxonMobil that had a 200,000, so it's probably hard to determine what the cost basis was of that stock.
I have to go back and take a look at some research. Again, I'm hesitant. There's been so many numbers thrown out, the 77 million, the 11.5. I want to be accurate with my numbers. I need to go back and look at that, sir.
Well, I'm guessing we didn't drop from 77 million to 200K.
On ExxonMobil, yeah, that would be a very difficult thing to do, yes, sir. I understand your question now, thank you.
So therefore, it would be very hard to figure what ExxonMobil contributes to the pension funds as far as in dividends or even maybe the capital gain.
Well, that's a very good point too, that one of the things that energy stocks have is a good record of dividends and income to the fund. So I think I would want to look at that. I think that's a very good point, sir.
Beth, you're willing to trust my figures?
Yes, sir.
You said we could possibly end up with a $9 million a year gap.
Yes. Now that was a fossil fuel, the larger fossil fuel and not the coal. I want to be clear.
Right.
When someone says, why did Beth say 9 million if she only has a million? They're conflating two different concepts, and that's part of the problem when you do this by soundbite.
And you've had, over the last 5 years that we've worked together, you haven't had any trouble getting us to increase the amount of money that we put into the retirement funds, is that correct? I'll answer that for you. The answer is no, you haven't had much.
Not since 2007.
So if we end up with a $9 million expense, and we do not fund it, over 20 years, that's $180 million. Plus your loss of investment and your loss of dividends is another $170 million.
Okay.
Which would put us at $350 million further in the hole than where we are now. And if my estimates are correct, that would put us in violation of GATS.
I would want to check your figures. My experience, just for the record, having worked with you on a number of projects, is your figures are usually very good, excellent. Yeah, but I would want to be able to look at that. But there are repercussions. If I could, back in the 90s and up to 2007, we did not fund the pension system adequately. The teacher system in particular, to some degree the state system over the years. And the argument is made, well, contractually they're going to get their benefits anyways. I want to remind you that in 2011 and 2010, the teachers made a decision to push up, to assist in this because they didn't create the problem. They paid in their required contributions, to employee contributions. The state elected not to fully fund the pension plan. The result was that the teachers ended up increasing the amount of contribution they made from 3.54% to 5%, and now new teachers and non-vested teachers are now paying 6%, and they pushed out the age of retirement. So there are consequences when we make bad financial decisions that affect the lives of our retirees.
Second question. If the stock was purchased for $84.50 in 2011, and it's selling today at $82.45, which is roughly 97% of what it was originally purchased for. But in 2010, it was paying 44 cents a share. And next month, it's due to pay 73 cents a share. Would you say that would be a prudent investment in stock?
I would say, based on the numbers you give me, that clearly the assertions that this is a bad move without due diligence would be wrong. I would want to again look at the numbers, but you certainly have given me a lot more comfort.
Would you be surprised if I told you that's ExxonMobil?
Somehow I knew you were going to get to that point, so.
It is. That's
Yes.
directly from the NASDAQ page.
Thank you.
Chris?
To follow Senator Betting's lead, come back to the bill. So you had mentioned traveling, I guess, to an ExxonMobil annual meeting.
Yes.
And that there was some practice that was, I can't quote you off the top of my head, something like wholly inadequate.
I said to the chair of ExxonMobil that I thought that his approach to renewables was wholly inadequate, and I would stand by that statement just for the record.
So that to me suggests that you found the company problematic in some way. And I guess I'm puzzled why, without any kind of mandate from anybody else, we would continue to stay an investor, perhaps make additional investments in companies that is problematic in this way. So the real progress in if you're in a hole, the first thing you stop digging. So
I would find the company's approach problematic, but I wouldn't necessarily say to its history that it has not been profitable. It has been profitable. And the 5-year period notwithstanding, the go forward, I have some concerns. And that's why I'm engaging my managers, and we make prudent decisions. Getting back to Jack's comments earlier, we have companies with human rights violations. We have companies that, we have folks that have wanted to invest, for instance, by talking slippery slope, correction stock. There are folks that have suggested that we divest from Israel. There are folks that say don't divest from Israel, we'll divest from you if you divest from Israel. There are all sorts of things around here. If we start to look and say that we can't invest in any of those companies, we clearly limit our ability to do so. I do not believe that constructive engagement with fossil fuel-free companies is a lost cause. Is it a hard road? Yes. But is it a road that I want to take a look at? Yes. If I find the facts tell me, that we should eliminate the coal position, then I would recommend and vote for it. I can't do it by myself, by the way. I'm one vote on Big Pick, but I would do it if the facts presented to me that way. Our managers are looking at these facts for every single company they invest in. They want to make money because they get paid based on making money.
But we keep coming back to making money. The visit to ExxonMobil wasn't about making money. It was about their practices around renewable energy. So if you're allowing a conversation with them about making inadequate investments in renewables, it seems as though we're going beyond this narrow straitjacket of only looking at returns. And if we're going to go beyond it in that regard, I'm not sure why we're disallowing ourselves from having a conversation broadly.
Because we have a proxy policy that, again, since I've been treasurer, we've made it significantly more green. Proxy policy to vote our proxies to push those changes in the system. I believe that ExxonMobil and fuel companies as a whole, fossil fuel-free companies, will be more profitable if they do diversify into renewables. So I want to encourage them to do things that I think will make them more profitable. But I'm not going to cut my nose off to spite my face. In the meantime, I'm going to do what I believe with my vote, my one vote on BPIC. I'm going to try to do what I think is fiscally responsible for the members of the system, and at the same time, push that environmental agenda, because I think that that's the way you get something that isn't mutually exclusive, but we can do it all together.
If I remember correctly, at that same meeting, the head of ExxonMobil said that they would not invest in renewable energy.
That is correct. And again, over in BP, we had 98% success rate in those. There's a difference. The regulatory environment in this country is very different than the regulatory environment in Europe, and you see different corporate responses as a consequence.
Well, I have to
Thank you,
say,
Beth.
before we move on,
Okay.
the $9 million loss that was cited before was based on selling all fossil fuel stocks all in one day,
That's not,
which nobody has ever proposed doing.
Okay. We're going to move, thank you.
move to the phone, yes, thank you.
Treasurer.
The only last thing I would like to say is I would be happy to engage with you folks about engagement, what that includes in terms of that collaborative process, and have a discussion about that. I want to see us move forward. What I really don't want to see is continue this at the expense of all the good environmental work we want to get done.
It would make me happy to see VPEC schedule a meeting where they're going to have all of these people there.
Well, I would suggest that we do some in-house work prior to that, and vet it, but I think but again, I would be interested in working with you on what a process would look like.